Welcome to John Redmann, Power of Attorney, the show that aims to empower you through knowledge of the law. I'm attorney John Redmann.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shauna Sanford. Today's show is a continuation of our conversation about adoption. Now, last week we looked at the legal issues surrounding the adoption process through the foster care system. This week we're focusing on private adoptions. It can and often does result in very happy endings, but there are many reasons why potential families need to be very, very careful.
We learned so much from attorney Tim Webre last week, and he is back with us today. What are closed and open adoptions? What are some of the risks involved? Hopefully everyone involved is being upfront and honest, but what if they are not? Are there warning signs to look for? We'll get quite a bit during our conversation with attorney Tim Webre today.
That's right, and we're looking forward to that. But last week we did talk about adoptions, the whole adoption process. We kind of got into that conversation and then really focused on the foster care system. This week we're going to be focusing on private adoptions, and you and I were talking and you said people really need to be careful when selecting an attorney to handle these kinds of cases.
Of course, you know, as we mentioned before, this is not like buying and selling a piece of real estate or buying and selling a car. We're talking about the most precious resource you could ever think of, and that is a child. And so the attorney is your guide, the parent's guide, and you want to make sure that you're not, and it costs a lot of money because there's so much at stake here. So choosing a good attorney, someone who has experience, someone who knows the ropes, someone who can guide you through a very legally complicated system. So it's one of the things that we'll talk with Tim Webre about today, and I'm looking forward to that discussion. I know you are. Let's get to it.
It's going to be interesting. All right, well, coming up next, attorney Tim Webre joins the show to talk about adoption. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to the show. Attorney Tim Webre is our guest, and we are talking about the basics of adoption. There's so many children waiting for homes and so many parents looking to adopt, but there are also some important legal issues that should be considered.
Tim has many years of experience handling family law cases as well as criminal defense. And in the area of family law, but separate from it, is adoption law. So last week we went through the adoption process through foster care. Today we're going to focus more on adoption apart from foster care. Tell us a little bit more about adoption, not in the foster care system, but in the private sector and outside of the foster care system. Why don't you define it generally for us?
All right. As I said on the previous show, there are three legal types of adoptions: private adoptions, agency adoptions, and interfamily adoptions. Foster care adoptions are a subset of agency adoptions. If you as a parent want to adopt a child, or you want to be a parent and adopt a child, I should say, your first thing you need to do is you need to contact an adoption attorney, not a family law attorney, but an adoption attorney or an adoption agency. You're going to go through a process which we discussed previously about a home study and a background check. The mother putting up a child for adoption this is a voluntary adoption. She's doing the same thing. She's contacting an agency. She's contacting an adoption attorney. The adopting parents are going to make a book, basically, of their life story, why we should adopt the child. And they have help. The adoption attorneys and the social worker and the agencies are going to put that together, and there's going to be a match between the two, and hopefully they will meet beforehand.
And that's in the private sector.
In the private sector, and when we say private, we're talking about private and agency. The private agencies as opposed to DCFS. And of course, in intra-family adoptions, they already know each other because they're in the family.
And again, for those who didn't watch the other episode,
DCFS. Children and Family Services, one of the state departments, which is responsible for the children in foster care.
Right.
Okay. At this point, the mother, the mother will probably file an intent to surrender, in which case she's going to be entitled to reasonable expenses during the pendency of her pregnancy. She's going to be entitled to medical expenses. she's going to be entitled to 45 days of post-birth her support.
Is this all coming? All these things you're describing, is that per state law, federal law? Where do all these regulations?
This is all state law. Okay, this is all state law. The judge is going to regulate what is a reasonable expense and what's not. You will actually have to provide an affidavit to the judge what was spent on this, because this is not a baby buying business. It's got to be reasonable expenses. The attorney fees are going to be listed on that also.
You said that she will probably file an intent to surrender. Is that
don't
not
have
something?
to.
So you don't. She does not have to do that.
She doesn't have to file an intent to surrender.
And as the person looking to adopt, is that something that I would want her to file, though?
Yes. The purpose of it is for pre-adoption planning, so you can plan things out. Okay. Now, once the child is born, if it's depending upon the circumstances, the mother has 3 to 5 days to back out.
Whether she has filed that intent or not, because it is just an intent, it's not binding.
It's not binding.
It's not binding.
The mother can back out.
Okay.
And she actually, to surrender the child, she's going to need to go through 2 counseling sessions with mental health professional, counseling on adoptions, and then she signs the surrender, giving the child either to the agency or to, in a case of a private adoption, the family.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Now we have the other party involved with this, the father.
Right.
All right.
Right.
If he's married to the mother, she cannot give the child up to adoption without his consent. If he is a biological father, unmarried, he can oppose the adoption if he's willing to and has supported the mother, and he's willing, capable, legally suitable to take custody of the child. All right. If he's not legally and physically able to take custody of the child at that moment, he cannot stop the adoption. All right.
Okay.
So part of the adoption process, and which is why you need a lawyer, is because you need to terminate his rights, even if he opposes it.
So that is possible. If the father says, I don't want to terminate my rights, that doesn't stop the train from moving.
That doesn't stop the train from moving. It is an obstacle which must be overcome, because if he's unfit and he can't take care of the child and has not supported the child, you become a father for more than just biology. You become a father by being a father.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So
if you just have some of your DNA out there, floating around out there, that does not make you a father. Okay. At that point, once the surrender is signed, and in fact, sometimes even before the surrender is signed, but when the child is born, when the child's released from the hospital, if the child's released from the hospital with the mother, they walk out of the hospital together, and she physically hands the child to the adopting parent.
And you have been there.
I have been there.
And what is that like?
It's beautiful.
Yeah, very
beautiful.
Emotional, huh?
It's very emotional, very beautiful.
Yeah.
And there are other circumstances we'll get into if the child's still in the hospital because of mental health, not mental health, but because of health reasons. You know, if it's longer, and the hospital will release the child to, but that's a little beyond topic. The next step is the adopting parents file the adoption petition. They will. The home study, which we talked about before, will be ongoing. And the adopting parents, depending upon the circumstances, is either going to be 6 months or a year till they get a final adoption.
Oh, wow. So this is a lengthy process.
It is a lengthy, long process.
When you get that baby, that's not the end. It's almost, it's a continuation of this process that you started.
Now, at that point, after those 3 to 5 days, once the mom has surrendered, once the dad has surrendered, it's they cannot go back and undo it.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Yeah.
That's permanent. The only way they can attack that is from fraud or duress. Okay. Which is anything.
Those are legal terms. Fraud means somebody tricked them.
Someone tricked them. duress, someone put a gun to their head.
Force them to do it.
Twisted their arm, put a gun to their head, told them if
Actually,
they
it's
don't
going
do
to
it,
have to be a lot more than twisting their arm. It's really going to have to be gun to the head.
Okay.
Because this is a traumatic situation. They're not going to undo it. All right. At the surrender, the mom is going to be represented by another attorney. There will be, the notary there, the other lawyer there. Some lawyers use court reporters there. So this is about as solid as you can get.
On that note, the adoption attorney is the attorney for whom? The adopting parents?
Well, everyone's going to have a lawyer.
Okay.
The person giving up the child for adoption will have a lawyer. Usually almost universally paid for by the adoptive parents. That's one of the expenses allowed. But you have an independent lawyer coming in to represent the surrendering parents.
I know you said this before, but if we're talking about a private adoption and you talk about the home study, who's conducting that home study? Who has the power to decide whether these parents are fit or are unfit as adoptive parents?
It's going to be a licensed social worker that's going to be doing that.
Okay.
And then the judge will review it.
Okay.
Right, and you bring up a good point. The judge will review it. So whether it's private or through an agency, or whether it's done even in the foster setting, this all has to pass through state regulated testing or approval. In other words, just because you do it privately doesn't mean you could disregard the state and federal mandated requirements. Correct?
That's right. DCFS will do an investigation of you regardless, even if it's private.
Even if it's private,
they will investigate you for your child abuse record, your criminal history, and they'll do a home study also.
Make sure the home is still appropriate for that child.
And that will follow all the way for a year. Now, one of the problems you run into, so supposing this is a year-long process, and then mom and dad commit a crime or get convicted of a crime, then you all of a sudden have a chance that the adoption will now fall through.
Wow.
Now, in which case, if it's an agency adoption, the child will go back to the agency. If it's a private adoption, the child will go back to the mother or the father.
Yeah, but before we go to break, because we're quickly coming up on the end of our first segment here, both you and John have talked about the fact that people really need to be very careful when selecting an attorney to handle these private adoptions. I mean, I'm saying most do end the way they should end, but there are cases where parents start, or potential parents start down this road, and it does not end the way
it blows up.
It blows up. That's why you really need to have somebody who has done this before.
Yeah, done this before, and someone who can help try to keep the process from blowing up. Now, the other thing we have to talk about, we've talked about all this, there's another, they're called facilitators.
Okay.
I have that on my list here.
They are not licensed in the state of Louisiana. Any adoption agency is going to be licensed in the state of Louisiana. There's regs they have to follow. Okay.
Well, define what a facilitator is so we know what we're talking about.
A facilitator is an organization out of state in which you pay them a fee and they try to find you a baby. That might be a little crude, but pretty much that's what it is. They try to set up the match. Some states allow it, so you could call a facilitator in California, pay the fee, and they'll try to match you with the baby across the country.
And the fee can be very substantial.
Fee can be very substantial. We're talking $15,000 on top of everything else. This is good if you're, time is of the essence. You want a baby right away,
and you got the money. And you find a reputable one. There is a reputable one.
Some states this is illegal. They do not. They consider them baby brokers,
but here in Louisiana, it is legal.
Here in Louisiana, you can use a facilitator, but they're not. But it's going to be an out-of-state facilitator, and they're not licensed. There's no protection in Louisiana.
Okay, we're going to let you finish that thought. We have to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to get to your questions about the adoption process, so stay tuned. We will be right back.